Good evening. Welcome to this special program of the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Library, Museum, and Foundation. I'm Gleaves Whitney, Executive Director of the Foundation. You may have seen this special exhibit we are hosting at the Ford Museum. It's going to be hosted there until May 2022. It's called Women in Uniform. And when you're looking at the striking paintings of women in that exhibit, it may make you think of a well-known mural, Ionia Street, in downtown Grand Rapids, a mural of a strong-looking woman in a police uniform. Well, the mural is a bigger-than-life portrait of Harriet Woods Hill, Grand Rapids Police Department's first African-American woman officer. This evening, we have the opportunity to speak with someone who knew Officer Hill quite well, her son, James Hill, who was born and raised in Grand Rapids. James graduated from South High in 1962, the very same school that President Ford attended. James went on to earn his bachelor's degree from Aquinas College and then began his career in the early days of the computer industry as a programmer, system analyst, and programming manager. After 29 years, he retired from IBM and settled with his wife, Shelley, in Cascade, Michigan. In conversation with James this evening is our new director of the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Library and Museum, Brooke Clement. Before her recent promotion, Brooke served as the interim director of our Ford Museum and Library and was also the deputy director of the Barack Obama Presidential Library in Chicago. And before that, she worked at the Bush Library and Museum.
We're very happy to have you here, James. Thank you so much for coming and joining us to talk about a remarkable Grand Rapidian, your mother.
Yes, she was.
Can you give us a bit of history about her and her upbringing?
Sure enough. Mom was born in Boyne City. I'm not sure how long she lived there. She did her early childhood was in Grand Haven. Her parents ran a boarding house there for the minorities or Black servants that were servicing the folks from Chicago on the east side going up to their lake places. So they had to have a place to stay, so they provided them the home there. As Mom told stories, she was one of only 2 Black kids who were in school, as far as she knew, during that period of time. So she had limited exposure to minorities. There were no boys, as she remembered. She came to Grand Rapids in her sophomore year, attended Grand Rapids South High School, and graduated from there in 1940. Then she went on to Grand Rapids JC. Today, they call it community college. During that period of time, she helped her mother, who worked as a domestic helper. And if you've ever saw the movie, The Help, that kind of describes the kind of work that she was doing. She did that until she got married, as I understand. She was going to JC to be a nurse, making 10 cents an hour as a domestic helper. That was pretty much, she married my dad, and they were stationed, or he was stationed in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and in the early 40s, and then he got shipped overseas because this was the time of World War II, and she came back to Grand Rapids, where I was born in 1944. She didn't want a southern state on my birth certificate, as the story is told. That's a quick synopsis of the early days, as far as she is concerned.
Wow. So how would you say her experiences as a young woman influenced her professional life?
That's hard to say. Didn't talk too much about that, other than the fact that when she was assisting her mother in the various capacities as a job, she did find several of their clients. One particular she talked about was a doctor who actually paid half her tuition at JC when she was going. So she was aware of the times and the difficulties individuals had, especially Blacks, but there are good people there that would also help you. So it's all a matter of how you carried yourself and how you presented yourself. That was always part of who she was.
Wow, that says a lot about her character, I think. So, um, well, your mother served this community for over 25 years. And can you just kind of give us some background about how she got started in the police department and what varied roles she had in the department?
Sure enough, uh, she started off as a clerk typist. Now, my father, he had gone to Chicago and he was in school to be, I believe it's called podiatrist or a foot doctor. And she needed some additional income, so she became a clerk typist. Those were probably some of her toughest times when she did that. That was early 50s. I think it was probably 1951 when that took place, 50 or 51. She had several ladies there that really did not want her to be there. I mean, as I remember the stories she told, I was pretty young then. I was in elementary school, but the stories were told after that, and I remember several evenings. Once Dad got back home because they ran out of money, him attempting to console her, and she was crying and everything based on the work that happened during the day. But she had a couple ladies. One would never refer to her by her name. It was always some negative term. The N-word was used quite often. There was also the situation where 3 or 4 of them would not use the equipment that she would use. They had a spray, some kind of a spray that she said that they would spray it with some kind of a chemical, and they wiped down the keys on the typewriters and any of the other equipment that you use. When she went to the lavatory, the ladies' room, if anybody was in there, they would always leave, or no one would come in while she was there. And she's also had only one stall that she could use in the ladies' room. When it was time to have lunch, when she walked into the lunchroom, everybody else left. So, I mean, she was kind of put in a situation where she was pretty much by herself and alone. However, she did have a mentor, and I believe it was a second line supervisor who kind of helped her along, schooled her, was her an advocate for her, and interceded in multiple situations as the story's told. And he was the one that encouraged her to apply for the job as an officer, and helped her along that particular path. And then when she did that, she became the officer, and I think that was in around 1955, 56. And during that period of time, of course, there was a section of Grand Rapids which was predominantly Black. And there was an officer, let's see, I think his name was Cole. Walter Cole, I believe, was the main man that was running things in that particular section of town, as far as officers were concerned. And he was a minority. Mom did not want to be put in a position where she was only going to work in that particular part of town, so she requested to be assigned to the juvenile division. And that's where she spent quite a few years in juvenile. And she had a good time. She had some difficulties there also, but she made some really good friends that I remember now, because now I'm hitting that stage where I'm no longer in elementary, I'm in junior high and going into high school. There was a Barb Endress, and I think it was Mary Hontan were very close friends of hers. And they assisted her, but they also saw a lot of the things that came at Mom during that period of time. So after that period of time, best I can remember, she would bring home some pictures every now and then. We didn't get to see very much, and she didn't talk very much about the job. But I can remember at one point in time, her bringing home a picture of a child who had been abused and had been removed from the parents, but the child had been set on top of an electric stove. So you saw the burned rings in the child's bottom. So she dealt with a whole lot of different things that were kind of very disheartening. And it was rough as far as that's concerned. So I know that from conversations that she gave up on the juvenile area after a couple babies died in the hands of parents where the child had been returned to the parents after they'd been removed. And it was the stress that she couldn't deal with that anymore. So she ended up becoming a detective. She took all the necessary tests and moved on. So she was always prepared for a challenge and moving forward.
Sounds like just a strong woman, and to be able to withstand the things that she withstood, especially very early on in her career with the department. Like it says so much too that she stuck with it. She and she just sounds incredibly strong, and what a wonderful role model for others to kind of to look back on, and that your mother did all of these things too. It's just, this is wonderful to share this time with you and discuss this further. So
She had some major things that she lived by,
yeah.
and she tried to instill those things in my sister and I. One of them had to be, and this is always as far as the job was concerned, and that is one of the things I remember. She said, being good at the job is okay. Being the best would be the goal that you would have, but being better than the best, that's who you needed to be if you're going to be a minority. I mean, that was one of the things that she instilled in us. Let's see, what was another one? There's no such thing as fair. Oftentimes the kid would say, that's not fair. And if you get into adults will say that's not fair. Also, on her message was, there's no such thing as fair. And never let another person define who you are. You define who you are.
Yeah, that one is great.
Yep.
Excellent. And she lived by all of that. So that
lived by that. That's very, very true. I'm sorry.
Very nice. Like, I was gonna ask what you kind of touched upon some of the cases that she worked on as a juvenile police officer or in the juvenile department. Do you know what some of the cases were that she worked on as a detective? Like, any ideas?
Well, I can remember when she, I'm not sure whether it was the detective stage or when it was in the juvenile stage, but I was a young teenager. And of course, they had to go through some physical training. And I remember her coming home and practicing judo on myself and my sister. That was always she wasn't a very large lady, tall or big in stature, but she got pretty good at it. So we had a lot of fun with that. But I know she was involved in checks, writing bad checks. There are several stories of when Vice used her out on Division Street when they were dealing with the red light district. And I know she had several trips going down to pick up prisoners in other parts of the country outside of Michigan and bringing them back to Michigan, to Grand Rapids. But as I said, she didn't spend a lot of time sharing exactly what she was doing on the job. I think that was kind of one of those confidential kinds of things. That was part of the business.
Well, it also sounds like she was able to kind of leave work at work and focus on home and personal, really separate those two. So, and that's a healthy way to live life, probably.
She did pretty good at that. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Except for the fact that we were the kids, and there are some things about her that carried over.
Well, I was gonna ask, what was it like to be the child of a police officer?
I really didn't understand what it was until I was probably in junior high school, 7th, 8th grade, at South High School. And a kid every now and then would come up and mention the fact that they had talked to my mother and what a nice lady she was, or your mom is really hard. She's really stern. But that's when I'm in what you're saying as a young kid and beginning to recognize the role that mom was playing and the interaction she had with people that I might know. So
Mhm.
that was predominantly what was happening during that period of time, from the standpoint of the discipline and the disciplinary actions that she had. She was very stern, very serious. There is a time to play and there's a time to be serious. And
Mhm.
there was no joke about that. It was often the grandchildren always talked about the fact that she had a way of speaking to you that would bring out whatever kind of information she wanted.
Mhm.
But
She
yeah,
knew how to coax it out of you, huh?
that's right. There was no lying. If you lied, you're in deep trouble. I want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Excellent. Yes. Well, you've mentioned to us before, those of us on this event here, you've mentioned that you only remember ever seeing your mother wear a uniform once in the time that she served in the police department. Can you tell us that backstory?
Well, that was an interesting time. When the Ford Museum was going to be dedicated, I believe that was in the early 80s, the GRPD asked for all hands on board for security purposes because they had dignitaries coming from all over the world for this dedication. And mom was requested to be in uniform, in a officer's uniform. That was the first time any of us in the family had ever seen her in what would normally be considered a police uniform. I know they had to go out and I'm not sure where it came from. It didn't fit right in the beginning. So they went through a whole lot of angst trying to get that right. But that was the only time she ever wore officer's uniform for that particular dedication. And that was not too long before she retired. So it was pretty close to the end of her career.
Well, and what a great connection to tonight's event even, and it's a great story, and it's kind of surprising to hear of a police officer only ever donning a uniform once in their career.
Well, yeah, she started off as a juvenile officer who was plain
Mhm.
clothes, and then
Mhm.
she moved directly into the detective bureau, which once
Yeah.
again was a plain closed environment. So she really never had the need to wear a uniform. And of course, when we first saw her, I mean, everybody laughed, kind of kidded her about being in the uniform and she getting ready to retire. But yeah, it was quite an event, and we took a lot of pictures from that point in time.
Well,
Remember?
good. Oh, keep going. You
No, no.
remember?
I was going to say my daughter, who's got several pictures of her with that. She's pretty young at that particular point in time, but she's kind of proud of grandma. She called her grandma dear. Well, all the grandkids call her grandma dear. I was
Mhm.
kind of proud of that particular picture. The only picture that everybody has of her in a uniform.
That's wonderful. Now you've shared some quotes of that you remember your mother and living by, and I found another quote of hers that said where she was quoted as saying, "I came there to do a job and I wasn't going to allow anyone to force me to quit working because of their prejudices. Once the door was opened, I never allowed it to become closed." So, what does that quote, you know, say say about your mother, and how do you feel about that being a quote she would have said?
Well, it's kind of the lifestyle which she lived by, the
Mhm.
message she lived by. It's that goes back to no one's going to ever define
Mhm.
who I am and what I'm going to be. I can do anything I want to do, or you can do anything you want to do if you want to do it bad enough.
Mhm.
You know, actions speak louder than words. He goes into that best and good, best,
Mhm.
and better. All those things all applied as far as that's concerned.
Yeah.
There's many other words of wisdom that she used. One of the big ones that I remember she was constantly saying is think, think, think. Uh,
Oh, I love that one.
don't react to emotions.
That I think we all need to learn that one.
And
So,
another one had to do with your choices will determine your future. Uh, Choices, relationships, and attitude will determine what your success is going to be. All those things had to do with walking into a situation where it's not going to be hospitable. You're not going to find it's fair. People are going to be against you, but you need that mindset to move forward and stay safe
wow.
and succeed.
Wow. It just sounds brilliant. Brilliant. I wish we could have, I wish we could have met her and all of this, but, um, and knowing how all of this about her, I want to kind of turn it over to like a softer side of your mother. um, so was there a softer and a funnier side to her? You mentioned that she kind of tested out judo on you all, but I mean, what else would you recall about your upbringing with her and funny stories?
Well, we can look at it from the standpoint, I was a Boy Scout, and she was involved when I started off in Cub Scout. She was a den mother, and I don't know how she had the time to do that kind of stuff. But in Boy Scouts, of course, I was going camping, and my dad participated in the scouting program. And we finally convinced my mother to go camping with us. But she was not, she was deathly afraid of snakes and the varmints that crawl on the ground. So to go camping, to agree, we had to go camping in jungle hammocks that came from World War II. Those are hammocks that had screens around the side and a roof over the top. So she was not going to be impacted by the outdoors. Well, that was an interesting, the first trip was really interesting because we were camping in Benzie State Park. And in the middle of the night, all of a sudden we hear our mom yelling, something's bothering me, something's beating me on the bottom. And it was a couple of raccoons were sitting there hitting.
Oh
And sitting there. So that's a little bit of fun there. But we traveled, we did a lot of camping as kids, as young adults and youngsters, when we had vacations. And we went to state parks where we predominantly camped at. Private parks didn't particularly care for minorities in that particular day and age. So we did Wilderness Park, Wannaman Falls, Porcupine Mountains. We went over into Canada. So we did a fair amount of camping. Well, as the years passed, after several years, we got out of the jungle hammocks and we were in regular tents. And she really enjoyed the camping aspect.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
quite often we would bring some of our friends along with us to go camping. There was also, she truly enjoyed going down to Lake Michigan, and we do bonfires. This is back during the day when you could put a fire out on the actual lake in the sand. And we go out there, it would be, it's known as Norton Township Park back in those days. Today it's Hoffmaster. But we used to do that, and we'd invite the kids around, and we go out there and it'd be in the evening time and it'd be late and we'd have a bonfire and roasting marshmallows. Mom was deathly scared of water that went above her waist. She could not swim. She tried for years to swim. There's always stories about my wife. When we lived in Florida, they used to come down and visit with us in Florida. And I know Mom went through several opportunities to learn how to swim, but she sank like a rock all the time. She couldn't even swim across the short side of the swimming pool as opposed to the long ways. I was thinking.
But she tried. That's amazing.
She tried.
I guess amazing.
She was the type of person you do not quit. if you start something, you take it to the end all the way. That was the way she taught both my sister and myself. If you decide to do something, you take it all the way to the end.
Wow. Well, you mentioned your wife, and I believe that your wife and your mother had a really special bond as well. Is that correct?
Very much so. After we retired, Mom slowed down and she relaxed. She spent a lot more time with the last grandchild because the first three, or actually the first four, she was busy working, and you could tell the difference once she retired. So she spent a lot of time with the last one, that's Brandon, and visiting with my wife. Every Tuesday she would come out and spend the day in the early, when he was a little baby, and she would go bowling, or she played canasta with her canasta club. So there'd be at least once a week, and then sometime there would be evening times that they would get together. And I know they had joined a canasta club together. And Mom was like 30 years older than all the other ladies. But as my wife says, they still talk about what a wonderful lady she was. And thinking about it,
That's
and
so sweet.
someone mentioned the fact that this was going to happen this evening. And about the mural, a lot of them, several of them were down there at the mural when that was dedicated.
Oh, wonderful.
So, yeah, she and
No,
that's the mural. She and
there's
my wife Shelley were really good friends. In fact, quite often I've heard Shelley say that she was probably the closest friend, real friend that she had, because they discussed all sorts of things as we were moving through time. So yeah, it was good. They have a good relationship. She could be soft when she wanted to be, and very stern at other times. And I think part of it had a lot to do with the job that she had.
yeah.
She had some good friends at the department, though. I can remember one of the detectives. I believe his name was Mike Skidema. I think that was his name. And I know he and his wife and my parents, they did a cruise together. I know she did several cruises, at least two before she retired, and several after they retired. But they were on the go. She had a venturesome. She had a lot of venture.
Yeah, it sounds like she really, she really seized the day. Like she wanted to live life to the fullest as much as possible.
That she did, very much so. And wanted us all
So
to
you,
do the same.
oh, go ahead. Go
No,
ahead.
I was gonna say she wanted us all to do the same.
Well,
Experience as much as you possibly can. That's part of life. A lot of us don't have the opportunity to do that. So it was always a matter wherever she went, she had the opportunity. Both of them would want to show us the good side and the bad side of things. So that's what life is.
yeah.
Go
So
ahead, I'm sorry.
you mentioned grandchildren.
Mhm.
So what was she like around the grandchildren? Was it very similar to what you recall as being her child?
I think that they had a little better than I did a lot of practicing as it was going on. Of course, they weren't living with her on a day-to-day basis. So that was a big difference. It, it's hard to tell exactly how they really felt, because they wanted to her wrath. But I do know they provided them with some special drinks. I know they take them to, excuse me, the first three got to go down to Cedar Point with them several different years. And that was quite an event. And before they went to Cedar Point, she would always take them up to they had a place in Woodland Park, which was a lake. And they would spend time up there getting adjusted to the family here and grandparents. Because mom and dad didn't function the same. And then they would take them down to Cedar Point or wherever else they were going. I mean, they all have their different attitudes about it. I can remember they were putting some new cement forms, and they poured some cement, and the kids walked down and stuck their foot in the fresh cement. And those are, it's really funny because it comes back and look at it, and they were, they were, I don't think anybody was over 6 years old, so they were pretty young at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
They laugh about that. I remember when you did that, and Granddad was mad. Grandma saved us.
That's really wonderful. Now, and speaking of your father, then your parents were married for 63 years. How did your father feel about your mom working as a police officer and a detective?
Well, I don't think there was ever an issue where, as far as Mom's job was concerned, they operated pretty much as a team in everything they did, as far as raising kids, as far as interacting with the grandchildren, their friends, as far as church was concerned. They, as I look back on who they were as individuals and what they went through as far as their careers are concerned, I look at them as trailblazers or pioneers where Grand Rapids is concerned. But I say that from the standpoint of, if you think about the pioneers that went into the Old West, blazing trails for others to come behind them, and they were in hostile territory that was not hostile. Mom and Dad did pretty much the same thing here in Grand Rapids. She was like the first female officer. She was also African American in an all-white environment. In fact, someone may have to verify this part, but when she came in as a clerk typist, she was the second clerk typist, as I understand, for the city. Then the first one, who I knew as a child, was very fair. Actually passed white. Dad worked for Rapistan, which was a conveyor. Today, this referred to as pneumatics, and he was the first Black that was in the office environment. So both of them were blazing trails for folks to come behind them. You had to act a particular way, you had to think yourself in a particular way, and be who you needed to be to survive in that particular environment, because it was their environment, it was not. So yeah, they got along real well, and they teamed up on us kids off. Mom would always say, "Go give me a switch, and we'll wait till Dad gets home. This is gonna hurt me worse than hurt you."
Oh, these are such fantastic, reminiscences. So I really appreciate it. So you touched a little bit on things that she did after retiring. It sounds like she still kept in touch with a lot of the police department after she retired, or at least, good friends of hers in the police department. What was life like for her in retirement?
Well, best I can tell, there were a few years that we were living in South Florida. And the first year she retired, and they would come down and visit us and probably stay about 2 months. And well, that'd be the winter time.
Yes, snowbird.
Yeah, they didn't particularly care for the cold. The summer was pretty hot, but they come down and spend time with us, and a lot of time with my wife. She would be working, and fix the meals, and then we come home and have meals. And they'd spend time in the pool together, because she didn't work full time. They had opportunity to do that. They go shopping. They had their favorite places that they go shopping. One of her favorite places was Bojangles, I think the name of it was, when she was down there. When they were home, they spent a fair amount of time up at the lake. And they had a whole series of friends, and a lot of those folks were, as I would call them, pioneers. One of the people I really remember quite often is Dave King, who was the first Black fireman in Grand Rapids.
Okay.
So there were a few folks in those days that were the pioneers as far as the
Wow.
community was concerned. And of course, when we moved back to Grand Rapids, that was the point in time when the last grandchild came about. And so she spent a fair amount of time getting to know him and spending valuable times in forming who he has become as an individual. And, you know, it was, I think it was good for her. She played a lot of golf.
Oh.
And she became a competitive bridge player and then went into duplicate bridge. And she had a pretty high rating by the time she passed away. And of course, my dad suffered with dementia in the latter days, and she spent a fair amount of time. Actually, we didn't even know he was having problems because she covered it up so well. Like I said, they were a team and they operated real well together. So, but retirement was, I think she really enjoyed retirement. She didn't have the stress and the pressure that she had from the job, and she could relax and enjoy time with her friends and her family and doing the things that she really enjoyed doing. She learned how to sew. She and my wife did a lot of sewing. I can't remember the term of it, but I know that the two of them put together a whole set of drapery for the house on Morris Street. So, yep.
Wow. It sounds like she just lived every day to the fullest, and that is just, you know, it's very impactful.
And she tried to prepare children, my sister and I, as well as the grandchildren, for what they were going to deal with as far as the future was concerned. Recognizing that we were African American and the doors weren't always open to you. And as you mentioned in one of her statements, once the door is open, don't let it close. Stick your foot in there and keep it open and keep pushing forward. Take advantage of every opportunity that's put in front of you. So, I mean, she tried to make sure we understood what it was all about. One of the statements to me as I was moving along was, wherever you go, there's going to be good people and bad people. You're going to find them in the job, you're going to find them in church, you're going to find them in schools, you're going to find them in the police department. Just remember, good people and bad people, wherever you go, you have the responsibility to identify who are the good. Stay away from that.
Wow. Yeah. So, brilliant. Again, she's such a smart woman. And yeah, I mean, there's not much I can say after that. So I know that somebody brought on the photo of the mural, and I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about the mural. So maybe we can bring that mural back up. Okay, there it is. So in September 2021, the mural was unveiled. This is right outside the Grand Rapids Police Department, and it's part of the Women's Way mural series around town. And so just wanted to get your take on the mural. Jasmine Bruce, who was the artist of the mural, said that symbolism flows through this piece as waves pay ode to Harriet's hometown, leading to the old-time Grand Rapids cityscape. The lotus flowers symbolized her growth out of muddy waters, all the while soaring above. And based on some of the things that you've mentioned throughout this evening's program, it sounds like that at least that symbolism that Jasmine Bruce was really looking for is indicative of how she lived her life.
Yes, very much so. I think Jasmine did an excellent job as far as interpreting who Mom was with her symbolism in the various pieces that's there. The flag, I know she had the original design that she had, which was already in process, as she was already putting the paint on the wall. There's somewhat of a smirk you find on Mom's face that originally wasn't there, as when I first saw it. And I said, she had a little bit more of a smile, with a little bit more personality. So I look at that and I say, yeah, it's a likeness that she came up with based on pictures. She did not have the opportunity to really sit down and talk to Mom to have a true interpretation of who she was as an individual. So, this is a rendition of who she felt it was.
And she's wearing a police
And she,
uniform.
yeah, she has a uniform on. Whatever happened, but that fits with the fact that if you're going to be recognized as a police, from a matter of a police officer, that you couldn't have somebody in plain clothes and anybody really recognize what the symbol is supposed to be there. So yeah, it's quite appropriate, and it's something that I hope will be around for a long time, and recognizes her as an individual and the role she has played within the community. And hopefully that others will follow in behind and take some of the things that she has done in the past. It's kind of funny because at the funeral, there were several people that came up and the kids talk about it, that mentioned the fact that, if it wasn't for your mother, I may not even have been here. And they're talking about when they were kids, and she was a juvenile officer at that point. But she was always more concerned about what was happening to the children and how they were being treated and how they would end up in their lifetime, as opposed to the adults. Adults have already typically where they're going to be. But the children are pliable, they're like clay. Got to be the right person, giving them the right message so they can move on. Yep.
I imagine that meeting those now adults that she had impacted as children was really just very special moments for you and your family during that time.
Yes, indeed, very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. Several of the children have made that comment in regards to her impact on other people they have known who are now adults. And even some of the actors in the office, a couple of the officers that Mom dealt with as youngsters, officers, GRPD. So it's good to know that she had an impact on a lot of people and did put blaze a trail for others. And there's been quite a few successful minority police officers within the GRPD.
Yeah. Well, I'll ask a final question, and then we'll bring Gleaves back on, and he'll ask you one more question as well. But it's very clear that your mother's story impacts the next generation, and I just wanted to get your take and what your family's take is on the recognition that she's getting now, and what that means to you all.
Well, it's really a good feeling to see her being honored in this particular way. Never anticipating this was ever going to happen. I can remember the first time when the organization started doing the special recognition of the women who made contributions to the Grand Rapids community. And I was somewhat surprised that they even brought my mother's name up in that particular situation. But I do know she played a significant role in many ways. And it's good to see that other folks are looking back and recognizing that there were some true trailblazers who made a significant impact on things that are going on today and enabling the youngsters and the youth. And some of us are no longer youngsters anymore, but it's a real good feeling to find her being honored as the individual that we saw her and we knew her as. And now other people have the opportunity to recognize and acknowledge that things have changed, and it's individuals like her are responsible or initiated the changes, because things are very different than what they used to be. And now they're not great yet. We got a long ways to go.
We do. We do.
Compared to what they were.
No, I could not have said it better. You and your family, your mother, you're such inspirations, and I appreciate you coming on tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to Gleaves here for our final question.
Thank you very much.
Well, there are so many good observations and comments. I could listen to you two continue to talk all night. But James, I do want to ask you, a lot of students are watching, I think, and these students are looking for what are the great leadership qualities that a person needs to have to excel in life. And I think you've talked about them, but let's reframe sort of your mom's achievements in terms of being a leader. You said being better than the best was what was required of an African-American or minority in the society in the 50s and 60s. And so there's a certain toughness there. And I wonder if you could elaborate for our younger audience, what were the great leadership qualities that your mom possessed?
Wow. As I look at her, and I'm going back with the past, there were several different things that I consider the leadership qualities. And one of the big ones is treating each person as an individual and the way they operate. Everybody has the opportunity to think the way they think, but you have to make your own decisions and choices as far as things are concerned. What you believe to be true is going to determine the way you think and your mindset. That's going to determine your actions and your habits and your choices and your attitude. That's going to determine how well you do in life. So, I mean, you gotta make your choices and decisions. Every choice you can make, there's repercussions associated with it. And believe it or not, the world is going to change. And like I said before, one of her big things is a lot of people think, well, that's not fair. That was one thing she harped on as far as my sister and I is, there's no such thing as fair. You got to make it on your own. How you succeed is going to be totally up to you. So that's probably the best thing I can say as far as leadership is concerned, is really go for it. Never stop. Once you start something, don't quit. Be true to yourself. Be fair to people. And there's that term, fair. Treat the individuals as equals. It's hard to say. There were so many things as I look back on my mom and the role that she played and the way she interacted with individuals, that leadership is not a matter of managing people, but bringing out the best a person has to offer and exposing them or sharing with them the qualities that are needed to succeed. And that's about as best as I can tell, best I can say at this stage. You give me a few minutes and I'll come up with some more.
Now, those are wonderful words on which to close. I want to thank you, James Hill and Brooke Clement, my colleague, for this evening's warm-hearted conversation that introduced us to your mom, Detective Harriet Woods Hill. And now we know some of the stories behind this remarkable woman in your life and in the mural that we can see down there by the police department there on Ionia Street. Well, programs like this evening's are what make the Ford a truly special place. And if your mind was enriched by this evening's conversation, if your perspective was challenged, then we hosted a successful program, and we hope that you will consider becoming a friend of Ford. To sign up and see our upcoming programs and exhibits, including the very special Sistine Chapel exhibit coming in May, please visit our website at geraldrfordfoundation.org. There you will find an array of resources to learn more about our 38th president and his virtue-anchored leadership, which is very much needed in America today. Please consider joining us in this important work that we do. Thank you and good night.